Okay, so welcome. Tech Talk began as an idea over a year ago about technology safety and having us be what I call a technology safe school. And we know we cannot be a technology safe school if we don't have technology safe homes and technology educated parents. So that's the goal of Tech Talk, is to simply bring to parents' attention some of the challenges that technology brings into their homes. And quite frankly, in the last week, I've faced some pretty major issues here in our building regarding technology. And so I had a conversation with Mr. Weeb this morning, and I said, I feel like I need to lay it on the line. And he said, you go for it. Our parents need to know what's going on. So you'll hear some of that as we go along. You have a handout. You also have a little booklet that's from the Saskatoon City Police and provided through the Affinity Credit Union. It is already outdated, the information that's in it. It was probably outdated by the time it was printed, and that's the nature of technology and kids and parents. As soon as we get caught up, they're one step ahead. So, okay. So you can follow along in your handout. Feel free to take notes. I'm going to give you an overview of what we're going to talk about here today. So essentially, I've already identified that we have a challenge, and the challenge is that kids are out ahead of us in terms of technology. And the other part of the challenge is that we simply don't know how to respond to it, and parents are feeling disempowered in their homes to respond appropriately to kids' use of technology. Technology threats, we will go into in some detail to what are the threats about technology. We'll also talk about boundaries related to technology. So what does the parent's right? What kind of boundaries can a parent set? How can a parent enforce those? We'll talk about technology resources. What are the resources available to us in Saskatoon? What are the resources available to us on the internet? And then the last piece we're going to talk about is the village. What is our village? What do we believe about it taking a village to raise a child? Great idea. So our big challenge here is to give our children a childhood or an adolescence so that they can have a healthy adulthood. And what we are discovering with technology is that technology is impinging on or infringing upon our kids' opportunity to have a childhood, that they're seeing content that is very adult specific. It's actually not even good for us as adults to see it, and yet children have access and adolescents have access to things that are not good for them. How do we get involved in that? What can we do? I remember a woman said to me once on the beach up at Camp Oshkosh, and we were just talking about movies. So my youngest is 21. She and I, 15 years ago, were talking about movies, maybe a little longer, and she said, Linda, here's the thing. I realize I must set limits for my kids because I have a responsibility to give my kids a childhood. And so that was a beginning for me of or maybe that was a reinforcement for me of setting limits with my kids about movies and feeling that I had the right because I have the responsibility. So we have this calling as believers and as parents to set limits for our kids so that they actually can develop appropriately. Just maybe pass that to you to put somewhere so it doesn't keep bleeping and interfering with us. Thank you. So what are these threats that we face? And the first thing I'll tell you is that we are a pro-technology school. So as we talk about the threats of technology, I want to acknowledge that we use technology here all the time. Technology benefits us in the classroom in terms of mathematics, social studies, science. We use it for research. It's totally changed how education is delivered. We have some students who access online education and participate and live in this school community here. So we are pro-technology. We just believe that we need to use technology with discernment. So technology has what I've identified as six threats to us. It impacts our brain. So we're seeing an awful lot of what I will call technology addiction. It can be simply addicted to checking that last bleep that happened on your phone or the vibration in your pocket. We have kids in classrooms who are coming to school as young as grade 3 with cell phones in their pockets that are activated, and parents can communicate with them. So if it vibrates, they're distracted from what's going on in the classroom, and they move from the moment of education to the moment of communication and connection. And so that impacts the brain. If kids are accessing things that are repeatedly viewed or unique, so we'll go right to pornography at this point. Statistically, most of our young people will have seen pornography by the time they graduate from grade 12. Some of them will have spent literally hundreds of hours viewing it. Our kids are no exception to the statistics that have been aggregated in secular classrooms and in Christian circles across North America and the globe. And there's lots of documentation of how kids are being impacted by pornography. The very first viewing of a pornographic image can be laid to memory in 0.07 of a second. So that image is accessible. It's like it goes, so we're sitting in a library, it's like that image goes into the library in the mind and can be reaccessed. And for many of us as adults, we may remember or have a sense of those first images that we would have viewed in paper pornography. And most of us were exposed to pornography at some point in print format, but that was difficult to access. Whereas online pornography is very easy to access, and kids can view huge quantities of it in like a minute. 1 minute of scrolling, they can view more than we could have in a lifetime of accessing paper pornography. So it impacts the brain. It impacts, for instance, dopamine. So a kid sees one of those unique images, they get a dopamine shot, and that's the beginning of addiction. And the pathway in their brain can become well-worn very quickly for pleasure seeking and be going back at it. There's lots more that can be said about that, but we are only going to talk for 20 minutes. Let me just give you a few statistics here. So 56% of 13 to 24-year-olds view not recycling as wrong in comparison to 32% that believing pornography is. 50% of adults consider it wrong to view pornography, while only 32% of teens and young adults do. So one of the things that's happening to our brains is that what we're viewing is becoming normal, and it's impacting our moral compass. So the moral compass says, well, no, that's not wrong, everybody's doing it. And we hear that from young people. Lay off, everybody's doing it. 51% of all Americans seek out porn at least once monthly. These statistics came from the Barna Group in a piece of research that they did last April. So April 2015, this was released. So it was released in April 2015. It was done the previous summer. 6% of Christian teens seek out porn daily. 12% do so weekly. So if we think about our own school community, technology is posing a threat to them in terms of pornography seeking. 18% of Christian teens come across porn weekly or more often, even when they're not seeking it. The internet is set up for them to come across it. And a simple example of that would be one day in my home, now this is 20 years ago or so, maybe not quite 20, my oldest son and his friend were sitting in our computer room. I walked in, they had a pornographic image up on the screen. I was like, hey, what are you doing? You know, and they said, Mom, we were going to eBay. And sure enough, on the screen was typed eBat. And that's a common activity of pornographers to take a commonly sought web address, change it to a commonly made typing mistake, and it brings up a website. And what does that do? It begins to create the appetite, just like we were talking about. So the dopamine, you know, get that shot of dopamine, and it's exciting and it's unique, and so you go back to that place where you've been, and it can be the beginning of seeking. There's lots of ways that that kids can access it and it not be intentional. So we have a threat to our bodies. We're not getting as much exercise because we're sedentary. So since I did Tech Talk the first time, we have Pokemon Go. So there's people out getting exercise with Pokemon Go. So there's a game that's getting people busy, but for the most part, kids are sedentary and they're playing games that are either violent. Lots of them are playing violent games. So once again, we go back to the threat of the mind, but we also have the threat to the body that we're simply not getting enough activity. And I see that in my office because I'm seeing more anxious and depressed kids, and we're hearing about more anxious and depressed kids internationally. So we're asking these questions: why are more kids so anxious? Why are more kids so depressed? Well, they have this technology at their fingertips, but they aren't making real human connection in a lot of ways. And the other thing is that often their technology use is a threat. What was previously occurring in schools, so let's say there was social bullying in school, that now carries on beyond the classroom, and it can happen in very public forums. So I was talking to a student this morning who told me about a class group. Okay, so if your class group is communicating with one another and somebody posts something that's unkind or bullying, if it's not refuted in that group, even if it is refuted, it hits. If it's not refuted, does that then mean that all 20 people believe it, or the other 19 that are in the group? That kind of thing. So that's a social threat. It's also a bodily threat, because when we have that happen, we have cortisol released in our body. It increases anxiety, those kinds of things. We also have spiritual threat. one of the things I've discovered from kids is the deeper they get into technology use, the darker they get into technology use, the less they see God as capable of dealing with their issues. So if they're actually dealing with a technology addiction, they will say to me, like, God can't be real because he's not doing anything to stop this. And they don't understand the power of addiction and how powerfully, once we're addicted, the Lord does come and heal immediately sometimes, and even in addiction, but generally it's an obedience, walking the same path for a long time and a breaking off of the technology that kids are using. The sexual threat is that kids are, especially those that are viewing pornography, are engaging in sexual acts younger, and they're perceiving them to be normal. So things that as parents, when we were in high school, we would have seen as abnormal behavior, kids are seeing as normal behavior. It's not only oral sex, but it's anal sex. There's reports of young people going to hospital, young women going to hospital, obviously experiencing trauma from anal sex. That has to have been initiated through pornography, typically accessed through the internet. So the sexual threat is real, and another piece of the sexual threat is simply kids seeing one another's bodies as commodities. So particularly young women being asked for images through Snapchat, would you send me a selfie? The creation of pornography where kids make pornography of themselves and send it to someone else. That's called pornography 2.0. So that's creating your own pornographic image and distributing it to someone else. And young women are being asked at an unprecedented rate for pornographic images of themselves to be distributed. We are not an exception here. So I don't think I can emphasize that enough. Our young women are being seen. Some of our young women have experienced the objectification of their bodies by young men who are asking for pornographic images that they created themselves. And it's a slippery slope. It might start off with, would you send me something in your gym strip or working out, and then there's a progressiveness to it, and that is reflected in literature that's very common. So we've talked about these pornography statistics. I think there's lots more, and they're worth having conversation with our kids about and being graphic. One of the things I've discovered about young people is we need to be very blunt with them. They know way more than we realize they know, and they want us to be authentic and to be graphic. So technology boundaries. I think I will say this to you right away. Parents have the right and the responsibility to establish boundaries with their children's technology. Sometimes parents say to me, okay, well, my kid bought their iPhone with their own money and they're paying for it themselves. I would say to you, if they bought their own Playboy magazine subscription and had it delivered to the house, would you say that that was okay with you? Does that suit your moral compass? Does that suit what you believe about how life should function? So we always have the right and we have the responsibility to be monitoring technology. And that means you have the opportunity to say to your kids, when technology comes into our home, I always have the right to veto its use. It is not a right here. So the rights, if you think about the conventions of the rights of the child, they have a right to a roof over their head, to loving care, to food, to an adequate place to sleep, to fresh drinking water. They do not have a right to access to technology. They believe they do because they've been raised in a technological age. So we have the authority to communicate that in respectful ways to our kids. We can establish boundaries like how much time kids have to use technology. It is completely within your right to say, you know what, it's 1 hour a day. Hey, you can have it 2 hours a day. You may take it to school. You may not take it to school. And that brings me to an important point. Every family is going to have their own technology rules. And in this community, one of the things that we need to figure out how to do is to encourage and honor and respect each other's own guidelines in each other's homes. But there are some things that I want to say to you very clearly today on behalf of our administration. Number one, we don't believe that technology ever belongs in the bedroom unsupervised. So we really encourage parents to get technology out of the bedroom. Technology does not belong in the bathroom unsupervised. Who of us goes into the bathroom to supervise our kids? I don't know. But we actually have had distribution of selfies that are pornographic in nature that have been generated out of bedrooms and out of bathrooms and out of gymnasiums. So spaces where they're vulnerable, those are places where technology is really not a good, safe place to be. Having said that, your child can be sitting right beside you on technology, and you have no idea what they're looking at. So one of the things I will just jump to then is access. We always have the right to see what's on our kids' technology, and that needs to be stated right up front. And if I've had parents in Tech Talk who say, "Oh, I never told them that," well, then I would say this to you. There's no problem with us saying to our kids, I know better now than I knew before. So if you've established a technology limit that you now understand, hey, that's not actually safe for my kid, it's okay to apologize and say, I haven't been taking care of you in a way I now understand I need to, and this is the new limit. And you're going to get pushback. You're going to get pushback. Technology, you're going to get pushback. Let me say it one more time. You're going to get pushback. I lived through the pushback, and you know, as I said, my youngest is 21, and I just can't begin to believe the amount of change that's happened in the last 5 years since he left high school. Like, phenomenal, the amount of pressure that has increased over handheld devices. The ownership of handheld devices has grown exponentially in the last 5 or 6 years. So, as I said, we have kids in grade 3 with their own handheld devices with 3G, you know, they've got data, and that is really very dangerous. So you have the right to access it, which means we encourage you to have passwords to all of your kids' accounts, to all of their apps. If a child or an adolescent says to you, you can't have the password to that app, there's probably a good reason you need the password to that app. We're not encouraging no holds barred invasion of privacy, but there needs to be a balance figured out where you get to look. I heard a mother say once that she just says to her student, it's mom police day today, please give me your phone. And then the kid hands the phone over, and the mom can look through anything she wants and then ask questions. And so she uses it as an opportunity for conversation, which is of course what we want to be doing. We want to be building relationship, not breaking it. And we need to be in a place where we can ask questions and we know the questions to ask. All right, I think I've covered all that. Enough said about that. So we have some resources. Oftentimes families don't realize that there are routers available to them that are different than the service provider has provided. So you can get a router that can uniquely identify to every device in your home. It can be set up so that it says, Linda's iPhone can go till 11 o'clock at night and it has this amount of security on it, so she may access anything. And Dad's can go till midnight, or whatever you decide. Susie's is off at 8 o'clock and John's is off at 9, and they have different security settings. There is a fantastic product by Disney called Circle by Disney, $100 product, $109, which will do all of this. It will also identify when visitor devices come into the house, and it can tell you what has been accessed through that. So that's just really phenomenal technology. If you prefer things like monitoring, then Covenant Eyes is an excellent website that you can go to. I really highly recommend them. Covenant Eyes has two services. One is filtering, and the other one is accountability. And one of the things that we want to be teaching our kids is to be making good decisions for themselves. So accountability means that you get information that says this is what they've been looking at, and it comes back to you, and once it again, it allows for conversation. So if you want to be building conversation and building good decision-making muscles, which is what I think we want to do here, right? We want to develop critical thinking and good decision-making muscles, then for some kids, they can simply have accountability. For other kids who are really struggling, they may need filtering, where it just simply doesn't allow them, for instance, to access pornography. One of the things I will tell you is that with the iPhone, Covenant Eyes is working on something called tunneling technology. So tunneling technology will allow Covenant Eyes to view or to report on things like Instagram and other apps that are not just plain Google searches. So that is not yet finished, and one of the things about that is then that you may think that your device is better secured than it actually is. So in Instagram, you can join you can follow someone who's got their feed full of pornography, so you think your child's doing well because they're not Google searching pornography, but they actually have got it on their Instagram. We must be smarter than our young people. This is a hard thing to stay ahead of. On them right on the device with a password, and so that will limit young people from being able to access things that you don't want them to see. The Center for Child Safety is a website. You can Google that. Fantastic resources. In fact, I've got a table of their resources over there. Feel free to help yourself. Saskatoon City Police, as I said to you, this is from them. But also, if you have questions about technology, or if you have concerns that your child has been, is being or has been stalked online or is being groomed online, that's one of the times where you can go to the Saskatoon City Police. Finally, we need each other. What does this mean? It takes a village to raise a child. As Saskatoon Christian School parents, you have made a very conscious decision to be part of this village. You haven't simply sent your child to your neighborhood school, which is what happened for me. I woke up in the morning and ran, 30 seconds to get to the schoolyard and went to school. Great education. You've chosen this community because you have a perspective about the values you want instilled into your children, about the worldview you want them to be educated in. And so within the context of this village, we need to work together. As parents, we need to make connections, and as educators, we need to make connections. And the hallway is actually one of the technology threats is community. So I walk into the hallway at 3:05, 3:10. We have parents standing in the hallway on their iPhones, smartphones, communicating with somebody out in the world. Well, there's other parents sitting or standing in the hallway right beside them, and they're not connecting. So we're losing community. I encourage you, put your phones away here in our building, get to know one another. When you know each other, you can work together to support your kids in the classroom grades. We need to speak truth. When you're aware that there's something going on that's technologically unsafe for someone else's child, they need to know. When you're aware that there's something technologically unsafe going on, maybe we need to know. And we have had occasion over the last couple years where information has come to us that has been very helpful in stepping into the reality of what's really going on for our teenagers and being able to address issues of sexual misconduct, bullying behavior, illegal behavior other than bullying behavior. So this is real. It's really happening to us. It's really happening here at the Saskatoon Christian School. We need to be speaking truth. Sometimes parents say, well, I'm scared of what the other parent might say. Well, is the child's future more important than your comfort? And that's the same thing with our own kids. Is my child's future more important than my comfort? If I feel uncomfortable sitting down and talking with my child about pornography or sexuality or taking selfies where I'm naked, or they're naked, I should say, and so I don't do it, I'm actually threatening their healthy adult future, which is, of course, what we started out talking about, that we want our kids to have a healthy adult future. And then we invite you to connect with our admin. Their doors are open. We've just had a situation here in the last 24 hours where my door was open, and my door was the one where someone came through to access support around a technology issue. Okay, I'd like to give you this poem, and then I will take questions. I wrote this last year on a whim. The way it is: iPod, iPad, tablet, iPhone, smartphone, PS3, laptop, desktop, Xbox. Oh yes, we've got a smart TV. The apps are all around us, Kik and Skype and Snapchat too. I love my Facebook Messenger. What's a mum or dad to do? They love their games and chat rooms, spend hours on Google Chrome. I fear now that technology has taken over our home. So, any questions?